What's up, guys? It's your boy Zowoki back up with some more of your crime talk with me. And we're going to be taking a look at Ruby Franke's. If you guys don't know who this is, it was a YouTuber back in the, well, not too long ago. 8 passengers. It's pretty much her husband, and the family of her kids. But apparently, this woman has been abusing her. I'm not trying to say it because I don't want it to be in trouble on YouTube, but she has done things that is remarkably, I don't even know how to say it. Like, you really want to just like like, I don't know what else to say with this woman. And the things that I've read that she's done to her children is uncannily, absurdly grotesque. And anybody that hurts children, murder, abuse, any of that stuff, there's a special place in prison and hell for that person. But with that being said, we're going to take a look at the 8 disturbing details in this case that's leading her to take a guilty plea agreement, probably so she's not looking at life, but because usually if they plead guilty, they get a lesser sentence, which I think is stupid. But we're going to be taking a look at it from the channel of Law and Crime Network. Hopefully, we take a look at everything that is going to put this woman away for quite a long time. So make sure you guys are subscribed to those people over at Law and Crime Network. And don't forget to subscribe over here, because definitely subscribing over here helps out the channel immensely when you guys hit that white bar icon down at the bottom right. Hit the bell icon next to it so I do post videos like this one. You guys will get that little ring notification that I posted that video. You guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, with that being said, let's get a video.
And sorrow for my family and my children. Guilty.
Ruby Franke has pled guilty in court to the abuse of her own children. Her plea agreement goes into detail about what she did to her kids, and it is horrifying. Also, what does this mean for a potential sentence? We break it all down for you now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Life!
Ruby Franke has officially pled guilty. This is a major development in a case that we have been following since August. This case out of Utah. Ruby Franke has pled guilty.
Oh, I didn't know she already did. Okay.
A YouTuber who, alongside her husband Kevin, created a now defunct channel on the platform called 8 Passengers. This was a very popular channel. It documented the lives of the couple along with their 6 children. It had over 2 million subscribers.
That was in the millions.
But it didn't come without controversy. No, viewers took major issues with how Ruby was parenting, or maybe I should say disciplining her kids.
So in our house, when we take something away, it's because they have shown that they are not responsible enough to manage it. And so we don't just turn around and give it back as soon as they start acting good.
It has to be consistent.
It has to be consistent over a minimum of 6 months. I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch. And it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry.
Now, at one point, Ruby ended up partnering up with a woman named Jody Hildebrandt, who was offering these life coaching services through an organization known as Connections. In fact, Ruby was listed as a certified mental fitness trainer on the Connections website. But in August, she and Hildebrandt were each arrested and each charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse of Franke's 2 young children who were staying at Hildebrandt's place. Her 12-year-old son managed to escape Hildebrandt's home, ran to a neighbor who called 911.
Gosh.
911.
That's my son. Are you kidding?
The address of your emergency?
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. We know there's been problems at this neighbor's house.
Oh my gosh.
He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. He's hungry and he's thirsty.
Now, the boy was reportedly emaciated with wounds, and there was evidence that he'd been tied up. His then 9-year-old sister, we believe that she's 10 now, her Ruby's daughter, was reportedly found in the house in similar conditions. She was taken to the hospital to be treated for malnourishment. Ruby, Jody, they were each arrested. They were charged with 6 counts of aggravated
Good.
child abuse. Our understanding that each count could be a max of 15 years in prison.
That's
By
it?
the way, Kevin ended up filing for divorce from Ruby, and according to his lawyer, he had been living separately from her for over a year before her arrest. Okay, so then right before the weekend started, we learned from Franke's law firm, Woodward Law, that Ruby was going to enter a plea on Monday, December 18th. There were apparently negotiations happening
Yesterday.
behind the scenes with the prosecutor's office. There was supposed to be a waiver hearing on December 18th. We had speculated, well, what could this be? A waiver hearing, of course, is where
What the
a defendant
hell?
in Utah can waive a preliminary hearing, a hearing where the prosecutor will present all their evidence to a judge to determine if there's enough evidence to go forward. A number of reasons why you'd want a waiver hearing. One of them is if you end up entering into a plea and you no
Yep.
longer need a trial. And what was particularly interesting in the statement that was released by her law firm in anticipation of this plea deal was who she was blaming. I'm going to highlight one interesting
Oh,
part.
here we go.
She says, quote, Ruby Franke is a devoted mother and is also a woman committed to constant improvement. Initially, Miss Franke believed that Jody Hildebrand had the insight to offer a path to continual improvement. Miss Hildebrand took advantage of this quest and twisted it into something
So
heinous.
starve your
Over an
kids?
extended period, Miss Hildebrand systematically isolated Ruby Franke from her extended family, older children, and her husband, Kevin Franke. This prolonged isolation resulted in Miss Franke being subjected to a distorted sense of morality, shaped by Miss Hildebrand's influence. So really putting the
Can't they ever take responsibility for their own actions? So this woman, Miss Franke, is blaming Miss Hildebrandt because she was guiding me and telling me that this is the right way. You should know as a parent what the right way is, okay? There's times that I'll Google, be like, okay, when am I supposed to do this? When am I supposed to do that? When do I want to have help, or I'll ask a parent for their advice or something. But I'm not going to do what she did. Malnourishment. Like, the kids probably look like they were dying. What is wrong with some of these parents? And you only give them 15 years? Make an example. 25 to 30. Make sure that these people know you can't get away with this stuff.
blame in a way on Jody. Very, very interesting. Now, with all that in mind, let's get into what happened.
Okay.
Ruby Franke officially pled guilty in the 5th District Court in Washington County, Utah, in front of Judge John J. Walton. She pled guilty to 4 of the 6 charges, 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, each one a second-degree felony.
Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
Now, 2 of the
So you gotta
charges
see them
were
for a
dropped.
while.
Counts 2 and 4 in the original information. Remember, I said she was originally charged with 6 counts.
6
well, 2 were
counts.
dropped. And these counts were about abuse of both of the kids, where the physical injuries resulted in starvation or failure to thrive or malnutrition that jeopardized the child's life. Now, I wonder if, since this was a plea deal, the prosecution just agreed to drop something, and maybe these 2 charges were
It shouldn't get
duplicative
at all.
of the other counts. Doesn't seem to me that they were tough to prove, as you will see in a minute. But either way, what Franke pled guilty to is incredibly serious, as you're about to hear. We all know how much these cases really emphasize how scary the world can be and how unsafe it can be.
Unfortunately.
That's why I wanted to take a minute to talk about our sponsor of this video, Morgan & Morgan. They have just been I'm going to go through this plea agreement with you. We have a copy. And what I'm about to read to you is what Franke is agreeing she did. Remember that.
Oh,
She
gosh.
is admitting to these crimes. Okay, so it starts. From approximately May 22nd, 2023 until August 30th, 2023. So now we have a date range. 3 months of this abuse. In Washington County,
And
Utah,
why?
the defendant, Ruby Franke, intentionally or knowingly inflicted and allowed another adult to inflict serious physical injuries upon her children that were ages 9 EF and 11 to 12 RF, as more fully described below. So she didn't just do it herself, but
She had somebody
seemingly
else.
allowed Jody to do it too. Now, again, it's important when you look at the ages here, seemingly 9 years old for the daughter, 11 to 12 for the son. Seems to me like this might have happened before and through his own birthday. Let's get into it. Count 1 is the longest. And I warn you right now, this is incredibly difficult to hear. And count 1 is
boy.
aggravated child abuse of RF, her 11, 12-year-old son. And it's about physical injury that includes physical torture. This is what it says. Count 1. The defendant's actions involve the physical torture of RF. Initially, RF was forced to do physical tasks for hours and days at a time. These included wall sits, carrying boxes full of books up and down stairs,
For what?
and working outside. Eventually, RF was forced to do outside labor without shoes and in the summer heat. He was forced to stand in the direct sunlight for several days. He was forced to remain outside at all hours of the day and night for extended periods of time.
For
These
what?
actions resulted in repeated and serious sunburns
Oh my
with
gosh.
blistered and sloughing skin. RF was denied adequate water for several of the days he was required to remain in the summer heat, and he was punished when he secretly consumed water. He was denied sufficient food, and when given food, he was given very plain meals, example, rice and chicken, while others in the house ate regular and more flavorful meals. He was isolated from other people and denied all forms of entertainment, including books, notebooks, and electronics. In addition, after RF attempted to run away in July, his hands and feet were regularly bound. Binding included being tied to the defendant and to weights.
For
Many
what?
times, the binding included using 2 sets of handcuffs, one on RF's wrists and one on his ankles. Again, very consistent with what we've heard so far about his injuries. At times, with RF lying on his stomach, ropes were used to tie the 2 sets of handcuffs together so that his arms and lower legs were lifted off the ground.
Oh my
The bindings
gosh.
resulted in injuries to RF's wrists and ankles, where the handcuffs cut through the skin and damaged the muscle tissue. These injuries were treated with homeopathic remedies and covered with duct tape. That's when we heard about the cayenne pepper being used. Then the bindings
Cayenne pepper? For what?
were placed on top of the duct tape. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, it goes on to say, again, all part of count 1, physical torture. Specific instances of abuse committed by the defendant include 1, kicking RF while wearing boots.
Oh my gosh.
2, holding his head underwater. And 3, cutting off oxygen by placing her hands over
This
his
is attempted
mouth and
murder.
nose. I tell you right now, I'm not going to lie to you, that is actually worse than what I thought we were dealing with. I didn't know any of that. I don't think any of us really knew any of that. You know, it seems to me one of the reasons the starvation charges
She's the
were dropped
mother.
is because it was duplicative of this conduct. You might not have needed that after everything we just heard. And it does make me wonder if that account, everything that we just heard, was not only determined from the physical evidence, the physical examinations of the kids, what the kids ended up saying to law enforcement and medical professionals, but maybe Ruby Franke herself, which she admitted to doing. I mean, again, this is her admitting to what she did personally and what she allowed to happen. We're going to talk about punishment a little later, but just keep all that in mind, that description. And keep in mind, too, when we talk about her putting the blame on Jody, there's the second count, which actually was count 3 in the original information document, but this is the second count that she's pleading guilty to. And this count is about aggravated child abuse on RF, her son, but it's about physical injury causing emotional harm. Count 2. The actions described above caused severe emotional harm to RF due to the fact that they began in May and escalated through the summer months. Clearly understandable. Additionally, the defendant and another adult, presumably Jody, regularly sought to indoctrinate RF and convince him that he was evil and possessed, and that he needed to willingly be obedient to avoid punishments, and that the punishments were necessary to repent. He was also told that everything that was being done to him were acts of love. Yeah.
this child is going to be so messed up now because he's going to think that was love. And he's going to be so confused when, yet again, like I said before with even Chris Watts, you are the parent. You decided to have this child. Should you have to have this child in this case with this woman? No. But you are supposed to be the protector, the lover, the security, the friend. I mean, friend to an extent. You want to be the parent first, but you want to be there for your child. And yet this is what's happening? She deserves life.
That level of manipulation, that again is so consistent with what we've heard about from alleged victims of Jodi Hildebrandt, including her niece, Jessie, who we interviewed in October.
So she strips you of identity, she strips you of credibility, and she isolates. And so she's saying everything that you say is a lie. Everything that you say is manipulation. You're manipulating everyone around you. You're lying and destroying everyone's life. And she would tell me all the time, if you just confess, I will stop. If you confess, I will stop, which is torture.
Again, it's almost verbatim to what this description was about what these kids had to endure. And I said kids because now let's move on to the third count. We talked about the son. Now let's talk about the daughter. So this was the third count
I want to
that
know.
Ruby is pleading guilty to, but this was actually count 5 in the original information.
Which they
And
dropped.
this is about the abuse of EF, Ruby's then 9-year-old daughter. And this is injury resulting in emotional harm. Count 3. The defendant's actions also caused severe emotional harm to EF. Other than binding and the specific instances of abuse RF was subjected to, EF was subjected to the same treatment as her brother.
Oh my gosh, and
She was
9 years
isolated
old.
and forced to do the physical tasks, remain outside, and denied food and water. She was also repeatedly told she was evil and possessed. The punishments were necessary for her to be obedient and to repent, and these things were being done to her in order to help her. EF was convinced that she was evil and needed to go through these things in order to repent. Can we just understand for a minute
And 9 years
what these
old.
kids psychologically now have to go through
Exactly.
to not accept what happened to them? I mean, that is a clear example of what we've talked about with other victims of abuse, that they think they did something wrong. Think about what these kids went through. Let's go to the fourth count. Again, this is the last count that Ruby Franke pled guilty to. This is actually number 6 in the original information.
Dropped.
And this was about abuse of EF that constituted physical injury that includes multiple injuries. Count 4. The defendant's actions caused 2 or more physical injuries to EF. She was forced to work outside in the heat barefoot. She was also forced to run barefoot on dirt roads for an extended period of time. Remember, this was during the summer.
Hot.
EF's feet were repeatedly injured by, and she was repeatedly sunburned. When examined on August 30th, these wounds were apparent by scabs, blisters, and sloughing skin.
So the woman, the mother, and this other woman that was an accomplice should be put through the same thing. Do the same thing what they did to those children.
I don't know if there's even more I have to say here, but so what we have here is
Attempted murder.
repeated physical abuse and injuries, not isolated incidents. They both suffered. They both suffered tremendously.
And
It
for
is
what?
horrifying stuff. Which leads me to an important part of this plea agreement document. So as part of this deal, Ruby Franke agrees to give up her constitutional rights. Her rights to a jury trial, to call witnesses,
She
to
should.
testify at her trial, to appeal. But now let's get into the consequences for entering a plea. Now, there's nothing in here that prosecutors and attorneys worked out regarding a determined sentence, like, and in light of this, we agree to 6 months in prison now. Instead, let me read this to you. I know the maximum sentence that may be imposed for each crime to which I am pleading guilty. I know that by pleading guilty to a crime that carries a mandatory penalty, I will be subjecting myself to serving a mandatory penalty for that crime. I know my sentence may include a prison term, fine, or both. I know that in addition to a 90% surcharge will be imposed, I also know that I may be ordered to make restitution to any victims of my crimes, including any restitution that may be owed on charges that are dismissed as part of the plea agreement.
Do everything.
I know that if there is more than one crime involved, the sentences may be imposed one after another
Yes, please.
consecutively, or they may run at the same time concurrently. So, it is up to the judge to determine what the
Consecutively.
sentence will be. And theoretically, it could be the maximum of 15 years in prison on each to run consecutively, one after
Please.
the other. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but in light of what she pled guilty to and what she admitted, my opinion, there is no way she isn't getting prison time in my mind. No way. This is horrific conduct.
Are you
And as much
kidding
as she
me?
puts the blame on Jody, she admitted to directly engaging in this behavior and allowing this to happen to her kids. And for a prolonged period of time, 3 months in the hot summer. In fact, let me add this too. It says in this agreement, quote, the defendant agrees to serve a prison term and the sentences for each count are to be served consecutive to each other.
So
It
do it.
seems to me that is something we may see. So even if it is 1 year in prison, that's a minimum of 4 years in prison. Theoretically, that's what we could be looking at. She could be looking at more. I'm just reading the tea leaves from this agreement. We will wait to see what happens. But I do want to move on to another big point in this plea agreement. The defendant agrees to testify truthfully against Jody Hildebrandt. And in return, the Washington County Attorney's Office agrees to remain neutral regarding future hearings before the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. So, in other words, she will be a state's witness. She will testify against Jody Hildebrandt.
To get
In
lesser
exchange, the prosecution will not seek to keep her in prison at a later parole hearing. That's what we were expecting to hear. That is a very, very big deal because you would want to give Ruby Franke a plea deal. And I imagine that's maybe why they dropped 2 of these counts. You want her to be the state's star witness against her co-defendant, Jody Hildebrandt. So you drop 2 charges, maybe secure some sort of lenient sentence. That puts pressure on Jody, though, to maybe take a deal, too. Having Ruby testify against you is not great. And it also seems that you would want Ruby to testify so as maybe to not have the kids be forced to testify about what they endured.
Yeah,
You
don't
always
bring them
want to
back into
avoid
it.
minor witnesses testifying if you can. That is extremely painful for them. And from a credibility point of view, those who suffer abuse at such a young age,
They're
it can
gonna
make
be
it very
scarred.
difficult to remember certain details. So having Ruby be your star witness makes sense. Now, I will say, could this help Jody Hildebrandt? Will she want to fight this? Could she say, hey, Ruby just admitted to everything she did. I had no part in this. It's going to be very, very hard to argue that given what we have just read and the evidence in this case so far, but something to think about. Now, there's a part that Ruby can withdraw the plea before the sentence. Her sentencing is set for February 20th. We will make sure to cover that here on
I'm going to be
Sidebar.
watching
But
that.
as for Jody Hildebrandt, she has a waiver hearing scheduled for December 27th. Will she plead guilty? Will that hearing be delayed? Will she merely waive her right to a preliminary hearing? We shall see. The game has changed, though, now that Ruby did this. And by the way, here was the prosecutor, Eric Clark, after the hearing where they held a presser talking about this.
This morning, Ruby Franke pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. She will remain incarcerated awaiting sentencing, which will occur, and the date was February 20th, I believe. We are pleased that Mrs. Franke has accepted responsibility for her criminal actions and that justice is being served to the extent possible in this type of a situation.
I don't think it's enough.
We're grateful for the law enforcement officers, caseworkers, Children's Justice Center staff, and others that have been instrumental in the fair and speedy resolution of this case. Because the alleged facts of the ongoing case involving Jody Hildebrandt are intertwined with this case, our office will not be making additional statements to the media at this time.
Definitely a win for the prosecution. And there you have it. Ruby Franke has pled guilty. She will be sentenced, and we will see what happens next with Jody Hildebrandt. That is all we have for you right now here on...
I can tell you right now, I will be covering this case when it comes to February. I want to know how long she's going to get. Hopefully, it's 15 years per count. So if you take that 5 times 15, she's going to do some time. I mean, that's the problem with, I think, nowadays, is some people are just getting... And if you make an example of somebody that does something like this, I think you'll have less people do it because they're going to actually, maybe I shouldn't do this because this is going to happen. Hopefully that's the case, because like when they did public executions way back in the days, people did less theft, I mean, you're still going to have it, but you're going to have less because people are going to be like, I don't want to be beheaded, or I don't want to be hung, or I don't want to be any of that stuff. But I'm not saying we execute her because, I mean, I'm not saying anything like that, but she destroyed this 12-year-old and this 9-year-old's lives. They're going to be forever scarred. They're going to put this into their relationships, their friendships, their father. I mean, they're going to have differences that probably a normal child upbringing is never going to have. Somebody referred this case to me. I'm definitely glad I looked into this. It makes me so mad. Makes you want to, I don't know what, I mean, we can't do anything, but it just makes you want to scream. Because children are the future. If we don't have the children, we're not going to have us, the human race. They're the ones that are going to take over when we're gone. But you also, when you have a child, you're supposed to love them unconditionally. You're supposed to raise them up in the ways that you were raised up or you believe in. Not abuse, not make them feel like they're a prisoner. What did that 12-year-old and 9-year-old do to deserve that? That's what I want. I want to know the motive. Why did they do this? Because they're possessed or they're evil? I'm so sick of hearing that. That's not what you do to a possession or evil. You let the people at the exorcisms try to get that taken care of, which it's not what they are supposed to be doing. Again, I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm just putting my 2 cents in this. Again, this is for educational purposes for you guys to watch and relate to with what I'm deciding or disagree, and that's what the comments are for as well. So, with that being said, the people that are watching and have made it thus far, make sure you guys comment down below. How long do you think she deserves? 15 years for each count? 1 year for each count? Life? What do you guys think? Please comment down below, and I will be definitely posting about this case once we see her sentencing in February. So, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share, and we will see you guys in the next video. So keep it real, keep it safe, and as always, keep nerding on, and we will see you guys next time.